I went to Bourneville College. I did my A-levels there in psychology, sociology and Punjabi. I also became the president of the Students' Union in college, quite active, really cared about a lot of things that were going on around the world. 84 was something that really did. I remember reading a lot about the betrayal of the Sikhs and not understanding why Sikhs were being attacked in their homeland, really, and that when you're young, you're trying to make sense of what's going on around the world, and here Sikhs are treated with such great respect, and even though there's discrimination, it's not to the point that what they faced in India, really. So I think these things, without you realizing, start to subconsciously make a difference in your life and your upbringing and things that you're interested in. And so even though I maybe wasn't thinking about the Sikh struggle, I was thinking about other struggles. So through the unions, what the students' rights were and things like that. I remember then going on to University of East London. I remember before I went, my father was like, sat me down and said, look, mere pag nu dag na lai, you're not going to be here in front of our eyes, you're going to go away, and I can't be there, so we have to just have this trust relationship, really. But please don't ever let me, lose the respect of my Dastard. And I think these things really stay with you, and I went to university, and it was really interesting because, you'd expect the first year being at university to go crazy, but I didn't. It was really interesting because you had this freedom, but it was the freedom to kind of explore who you were, and it wasn't to do what everybody else was doing about going out drinking, and people found that strange that I didn't drink at university. But actually I saw this great hypocrisy of Asian men as well, where they'd be going out drinking and girls would drink, and then they'd say really derogatory things about them, but actually they're okay to go out and drink, and I used to think that's just terrible. But I loved London, it really, I remember spending a lot of time in Charing Cross in the bookstores, in the old bookstores, and finding amazing books, because actually when I was growing up I found my father's book, Franz Kafka, and that's how I got into reading, really, because of him. And so I loved reading things like Jack Kerouac, the Enlightenment thinkers as well, and just various really non-fiction books about travel and things like that. So I spent a lot of time there. Also the museums. I mean, London is just a fascinating place where you can lose yourself. I have to say the British Museum is probably one of my favourite places in London. So I got to really start thinking about myself, but it was just great to be in a household with other girls where you just made your normal decisions, and that was great in itself. But one of the things for me that was really important is where I lived. I was living in Ilford at the time. There was a Gurdwara in Barking, and actually I regularly sort of went there, and actually when I missed home, or I kind of felt like actually I feel out of place, that's where I went to kind of feel that connection. And it's amazing how growing up we spent so much of our time at the Gurdwara that being able to find a Gurdwara wherever you are kind of very quickly instills that sort of feeling in you. So for me that was really important, and I don't think it ever left me. So whilst I may have broken my Amrit, as it were, very young, I don't think it ever just leaves you, or that there is always that pull in some way. So university was just really interesting. I joined the Cuba Solidarity campaign. I was really keen to know what was happening in Cuba. So human rights around the world was of an interest to me. I was very lucky when I was at university. I got to travel, so I did Camp America in my second year. So I went to work in upstate New York, which was just fascinating. So suddenly you get to New York, and they take you to this place in Broadway and over the world, and you're going to work on a camp. So I went to Brewster in upstate New York on a camp which is picturesque. It's got a lake, it's got these little lovely cabins, and I was working with children and young people with learning disabilities. And so, you meet people from Holland, and suddenly you're exposed at a very young age to just the world and traveling on your own kind of thing. But it was really amazing, and I had family. My chacha's daughter lived in, my Thai's daughter, sorry, lived in New York. So when I had a vacation, I was able to come and stay with them. And I met this wonderful woman on the kibbutz who was from London but Brazilian, and we traveled to Florida and Miami together after the camp had finished. And then I went to stay with my cousins in New York, and then sort of came back. But that just kind of gave me a real travel bug to understand really how other places and people and cultures, I found it really fascinating.